Are you trying to build some muscle in the gym? If you are, these are 4 ways you can maximize your time in the gym and what you're doing with your weight training program. Hey, what's going on everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're covering 4 different ways you can maximize your muscle growth in the gym. All of these things are things you should be aware of when you're putting together your own workout program and your workouts you're doing in the gym. Keeping these things in mind will help ensure you can maximize the amount of muscle growth you're getting. And if you're new here and you're new to my videos or my channel and you want to keep seeing fitness videos like this every week, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. So I'm going to be using a recent research review that actually came out a few months ago as my reference for this video. I'm going to have it here and down in the description. I am going to toss in some of my own personal recommendations as well that kind of goes hand in hand with the information provided in this paper. If you want to give the paper a read, feel free to do so. They cover a lot of information in there. I'm covering 4, so that way this video is simple, clear, easy to understand. If you want to see any more broken down or want to see more videos like this where I kind of take a good research paper or review or something like that and break it down really easily for you, let me know down in the comments if that would be helpful. So the first thing you need to keep in mind is the number of reps and the actual weight or load you're using when doing your exercises. Now there is a lot of, I would say, confusion around certain hypertrophy rep ranges, but this paper really sheds to light that a variety of rep ranges can be useful, and there is no really one hypertrophy zone, as some people would say. I'm sure people would prefer hey, do 6 to 12 reps or 8 to 10 reps. Do those reps and that'll be hypertrophy. But the real answer to this question is fairly vague, which some people may not be a fan of, but it's kind of the reality of it, that each person is different. The rep range that works well for me may not work well for you. And everybody responds a little bit different from different loads and rep ranges. Some people may respond really well to 15 reps. Some people respond better to 6 reps with heavier weights. So the exact weight you're using or the particular rep range you're using isn't really a big deal, but there is a few things we need to consider along with that. So on the one end, if you're lifting really light with a lighter weight and you're doing higher rep ranges, the big thing that usually accompanies that is a lot more fatigue. You'll have some more lactic acid buildup, more of a burning feeling. It's going to be more uncomfortable versus if you're doing, let's say, 6 to 8 reps. So one of the biggest downfalls of doing, let's say, 15 or more reps is that there's going to be a lot more discomfort associated with it, and it's going to be harder to perform at your best, and you may end up stopping your set short just because of that accumulation of fatigue and all the fluids building up in that muscle. So when working in those higher rep ranges, your end point for a set may just be due to fatigue or the discomfort associated with it. Whereas when you're in heavier rep ranges, let's say 6 to 8 reps versus 15 and up, your stopping point in that set will be due to purely muscle fatigue or getting close to that failure point. So what's the best rep range and weight you should be using? Well, it depends. The best thing to do in this situation is to see what works best for you. The best thing to do would be to stick to a rep range, and let's say month 1, do 6 to 8 reps, heavier weights. Month 2, 12 to 15 reps, lighter weights to accommodate those higher reps. And really gauge how you perform, how your recovery is, how your growth is, do some measurements, and do that on a monthly basis and see what ends up working better for you in different muscle groups. Over time, you'll find the rep range and the loads that you respond the best to and what you'll see the better muscle growth with. So unfortunately, there isn't one best rep range, but if you do put in the time and the work, you can find the best rep range for you because everybody responds differently. Number 2, how much volume should you be doing, or how many sets per week should you be doing? Again, this answer is a little mixed, just like the previous one, but there are some minimums and maximums you should observe. This review found that a minimum of 10 sets per week So let's say if you're trying to grow your biceps, you would want to do 10 sets of biceps per week at a minimum to ensure you're actually building some muscle tissue. Now, there were some studies showing that greater than 20 sets per week was optimal, but there were also some studies showing that the opposite was also true, where greater than 20 sets wasn't so optimal. And largely, this comes down to what I mentioned in the first thing with your reps and your weight. Everybody responds differently and everybody's recovery is different. So in general, more volume is a good thing. It's a form of progressive overload. You're increasing the volume you are doing on a weekly or monthly basis. But there is a point of diminishing returns. If you have too much volume, your performance is going to decrease. Your ability to recover is also going to decrease. You're going to have more fatigue due to that increase in volume as well. So you may not be able to lift as heavy or do the reps that you may need for yourself. So ideally, you'd want to shoot for a minimum of 10 sets per week for your different muscle groups and most likely get a maximum of 20. The ideal thing to do would be to start at 10. On week 1, see how you feel, how you perform, how you recover, how all of that is. And then week 2, gradually bump up the sets. Maybe instead of 10, go to 14 and see how that feels. Then gradually increase to a point where you're kind of at a good sweet spot of recovery, performance, and you notice some good growth. So as long as you're getting at least 10 a week, you're good, but do try to get a little more, but not too much so it impairs your recovery and performance. So our third one is frequency. How many days per week should you be working out a muscle group? So unlike the other two, this one does have a clear answer, which is pretty nice. And from that last topic on volume, you may be asking, well, can I get all those sets in one day or multiple days, and does it matter? And this is where frequency comes in. So when actually accounting for volume differences, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're training a muscle group once a week, twice a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week. As long as the volume is the same throughout the week, then you're gonna be great. So that is, if you need to get in 12 sets of chest exercises, and it doesn't really matter if you do it in one day or split it up into 3 different days. So optimal frequency really comes down to what fits in your schedule the best and how you recover, how you perform. You'll notice a lot of these are based on recovery and performance, because the one thing is, the better you can perform in the gym, the better the results you're going to have. And the more that you can recover, the better results you're going to have. That's a lot of what hypertrophy comes down to, is how well can you recover and how hard can you push yourself. So with frequency, don't be worried. If one of your friends is maybe doing 3 days a week and seeing great gains, maybe he's just getting more volume in. As long as you're getting the sets per week you need, it's fine. If you notice to get all of your sets in one workout, let's say for your leg workout, is just exhausting and fatiguing, split it up into 2 workouts. Do one of them Tuesday, do one of them Friday. That'll be an excellent alternative. You're still gonna see amazing muscle growth because you're getting the same number of sets, but it's gonna be less tiring and you can perform a little better, most likely, on each day. So number 4, what should your rest time be in between your sets? Now, I find within social media, there is a good amount of confusion around this. A lot of people like to think that less rest time, because it's going to be harder, more fatiguing, that it's going to be better for muscle growth, but the opposite is actually true. When it comes to maximizing your muscle growth, the longer the rest tends to be better. It means you're going to be able to recover better, push yourself harder, perform better on each set, and load the muscle a lot greater. So in general, if you're doing a multi-joint movement, like a bench press, deadlift, squat, any large compound movement, you'd want to take at least 2 minutes of rest. This is usually because there's a greater amount of fatigue induced by these exercises as well. If you're doing a single joint exercise, let's say a bicep curl or a tricep push down or a shoulder raise, anywhere from 60 to 90 seconds tends to be sufficient. This is largely because they're smaller muscle groups, there's a lot less work that needs to be done, it's going to recover a lot faster, and it's less fatiguing. So never be afraid to take more rest. I know it's boring and it looks like you're just kind of sitting down, not doing anything at all, and you only do exercise every 2 to 3 minutes, but it is going to help you see some more muscle growth. And by taking more rest, this brings us to our next topic, which is number 5. I think at the start I said 4, but apparently I can't count, so this is number 5. And it's reaching a set end point. This is also training to failure, or having a certain reps in reserve. So this topic does have a couple different schools of thoughts. On one side, we have the group that says training to failure is going to be optimal for muscle group. So you should reach a failure point on your sets. Whereas you have your other group, which is more of the reps in reserve group, and they recommend shooting for a certain reps in reserve to maximize muscle growth. So shooting for 1 to 2 reps in reserve at the end of a set instead of training to that failure point. And the research on this topic is mixed. There's no one clear answer. But based off the research, I'm going to give you my recommendation and the reasoning behind my recommendation. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, the big things you want to look out for are maximizing recovery and maximizing your performance so you can actually push some more weight. And when we train to failure, when we hit that mechanical failure point, when we can't get another rep, what happens? What's associated with that? It's more fatigue. It's a lot more fatigue that you accumulate when you hit that failure point versus 1 to 2 reps from that failure point. So if you try to hit failure on, let's say, your 3 sets of dumbbell presses, your fatigue is greatly going to accumulate set to set. So in set 2 and set 3, you're not going to be able to perform at your best. Whereas since training 1 to 2 reps until that failure point does provide similar muscle growth benefits, it would be best to stop 1 or 2 reps so that way you don't accumulate as much fatigue and you can perform your best or even better on each set. So that way you're going to get a lot more out of the exercise. Another thing that we do need to factor in with training to failure is the safety concern as well. Training to failure can be a little risky on different exercises. If you're alone and doing a bench press, training to failure, not always the brightest idea. Or if you're doing squats and you don't have safety pins or know how to bail on a squat, it could be a little bit dangerous. If you're doing things like a bicep curl, sure, training to failure would be okay. You can just drop the weights. So that is another thing you need to consider, whether or not you want to train to failure or 1 to 2 reps from failure. Is it safe? Am I okay to do it? Or will I get hurt doing it? So that's why I recommend training 1 to 2 reps from failure, because you're going to perform better on each set, you'll have less fatigue, and it's going to be a lot safer, so you're not putting yourself at risk. So those were my 5 ways to maximize muscle growth in the gym. Now I know you're probably thinking, and you may be typing a comment, that these aren't really clear things. They're a little vague or not super precise. And that's kind of the reality when it comes to resistance training and maximizing muscle growth. One thing a lot of people fail to consider is that everybody's body reacts differently. Just like I mentioned at the very start of the video, everyone responds to different weights, different rep ranges. Everybody's mix of muscle fiber types in their body is a little bit different. So different training styles and rep ranges and weights and recovery times and sets is going to vary person to person. Everybody's life is also different as well. Some people have different levels of stress. Some people can get more or less sleep than others. Some people's nutritional requirements are different. Some people just have busy lives and maybe can't eat at their potential. So there's a lot of things you need to factor in when really optimizing your training for hypertrophy. It's very individual. And the best thing to do, which people, I feel like, never like this answer, but the best thing to do is to figure out what works best for you. And the way to do that is to get a piece of paper, a pen, and track what you're doing. Track what you're doing, stick to it for a month or 2, and then measure your progress. Switch it up for another few months, track exactly what you're doing, measure your progress. And by doing this, it does take a bit of time, but you're going to figure out exactly what works the best for you. And what works best for some bodybuilder on Instagram may not always be applicable to everyone following him. So if you do want to read further, I'd recommend reading the paper. It is linked below. there's any topic you would want me to discuss further, or there's certain like topics or research reviews you would want me to break down, let me know in the comments and I will gladly cover that for you. And obviously, yes, there are way more than 5 things that will benefit you in terms of muscle growth. If you want to see more in more details about other ones, let me know in the comments as well. So thanks for watching, appreciate all of you, and I'll see you guys next time.